Metal hooks clanked against fiberglass with the kind of finality you only hear in courtrooms or cemeteries. Sharp, deliberate, echoing across the lake like a verdict nobody could appeal. Two men in matching polo shirts moved with calm precision, orange straps looping around the gleaming hull of Karen's oversized boat. Their voices were low, professional, the kind of tone that didn't care for screaming neighbors or frantic protests, and screaming there was. Karen, the self-crowned queen of our HOA, had lost her usual smug composure. Her sun hat was gone, her hair frizzed from the humid air, and her lipstick had smeared into streaks that made her look more desperate than dignified. She clawed at the paperwork in one man's hands, her voice cracking high enough to make even the ducks scatter. "You can't take it! That's my property! This is theft! Do you know who I am?" The taller towman didn't even glance up. He tapped the stamped page clipped to his board. "Unregistered vessel, ma'am. County records show no license. HOA enforcement clause allows impound. We're just doing our job." Phones were out. Neighbors crowded the shoreline like an impromptu jury, their screens glowing, catching every frantic gesture, every shriek. Some were wide-eyed with shock, others barely hiding their smirks, and a few looked like they'd been waiting for this moment for years. I didn't need to say a word. I just stood at the edge of my dock, coffee steaming in one hand, deed folder in the other. No speech, no gloating, just silence. The kind that cuts sharper than any insult. Because the woman who had tried to strip me of my peace, my dock, my mornings, was now watching her crown jewel get rolled away on rubber tires. But rewind 2 hours, and I was just a man trying to breathe in the calm of a lake that had cost me decades of sweat to earn. The water that morning was glass, perfect still, the kind of surface fishermen pray for and poets write about. I sat at the end of my dock, steam rising from my mug, the boards warm beneath my feet. For 35 years, I'd worked construction. 35 years of hammering nails until my hands were calloused, of bosses yelling deadlines into my ears, of saving every dime while raising 2 kids into adults with lives of their own. When they left home, I finally made good on a promise I'd whispered to myself on countless dusty job sites. "One day, Jack, you'll have a place on the water. One day, peace will be yours." This house wasn't the fanciest on the lake. White, siding faded a little under the sun, shutters that could have used new paint. But it was mine, paid for, earned, and the dock, every board cut by my own saw, every nail hammered with my own hand, county permits signed and stamped. That dock wasn't just lumber over water. It was freedom. It was mornings like this. It was teaching my grandson to tie a fisherman's knot, watching him grin when the line held. It was evenings dangling our legs into the water, waiting for frogs to croak and the crickets to sing. It was the first sip of coffee with fog curling low over the surface, the sun climbing slow, painting everything gold. If life had a front porch, this dock was mine. I thought the neighborhood would be the cherry on top, a small, picturesque community hugging a crystal lake. Old Bob next door grilling steaks on weekends, the Martins walking over with pies, kids riding bikes, waving as they passed. For a while, it was exactly that, a kind of peace I hadn't known since childhood. But peace, I've learned, always has a price, and around here that price had a name: Karen. Karen wasn't the kind of person you ignored. She made sure of that. Mid-40s, always overdressed for a lakeside stroll, her heels clicking against the pavement like a metronome of arrogance. She strutted with a clipboard glued to her arm, sunglasses so large they looked like armor. Her lipstick was as loud as her opinions, and her voice carried across the lake like a bullhorn. Neighbors tolerated her the way people tolerate a summer mosquito. Slap when you can, but mostly just hope it buzzes away. She loved being the president of the HOA, though president was a title she treated like mayor, judge, and sheriff rolled into one. To her, every mailbox shade, every flower bed, every lawn length was an extension of her crown. Her house sat, the largest, perfectly trimmed, sterile as a magazine spread. Out front, polished to a blinding gleam, sat her pride and joy, a boat so oversized it looked comical in our modest lake. Miami belonged to a yacht like that, not here. But Karen flaunted it like a throne on water. Every weekend she paraded it, around, music blaring, champagne glass in hand, parking it just close enough to bump against my dock at night. Sometimes I'd hear the faint scrape, fiberglass nudging my boards, and wonder if the boat itself was trying to pick a fight on her behalf. I told myself to let it slide. Everyone did. Neighbors smiled, nodded, swallowed their annoyance. Better to pay the silly fines than clash with the queen. That's how Karen ruled, not with fairness, not with kindness, but with exhaustion. She wore people down until they bent just to get rid of her, but I wasn't wired that way. I'd faced louder foremen than her, harsher inspectors, clients who tried to cheat me out of wages. Compared to them, Karen was just another bully with a clipboard. Or so I thought. The first strike came one summer morning when the lake shimmered so calm it felt like glass. I was halfway through my mug of coffee when her shadow cut across the dock. Karen, in her oversized sun hat, heels clicking against my boards, clutching a thick folder. Her voice sliced the air before I could even say good morning. "You have 24 hours to vacate this dock," she snapped, waving a violation notice like a sword. "Or face fines." I blinked. "Vacate? Karen, this is my dock. Built it myself. Permits, inspections, county approval. Signed, sealed, stamped." She smiled. That smile that says the law bends to whoever holds the clipboard. "The HOA standards are higher than the county's. This structure is unauthorized." I almost laughed. Unauthorized? I had the paperwork tucked neatly in a folder back inside my house, stamped with the county seal. If she wanted to play the rules game, she'd picked the wrong opponent. But I didn't show my hand. Not yet. I just sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch. Her eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to people not flinching, not used to people meeting her gaze without shrinking. She muttered something about fines escalating, then turned sharply, heels digging into the wood like nails, and marched back up the path. I watched her go, the sun glittering off her polished boat, and I smiled. Because what she didn't know, what made me grin through her tirade, was that in less than an hour the balance of power would shift. Karen had chosen me as her new project, and she had no idea she'd just picked the wrong fight. The first letter arrived the way bad weather does. Quiet at first, then suddenly everywhere. A bright yellow envelope with the HOA crest like a smug stamp of certainty. It lay in my mailbox as if it had been lounging there all morning, legs crossed, bored, waiting to ruin someone's day. I cracked the seal with my thumb. Unauthorized structure. Dock. Not in compliance with community standards. Must be removed within 30 days. Fines will apply. Removed. The words slid cold across my spine. I walked back down to the dock and read it again with the water breathing gently against the pilings. The county inspector's signature flashed in my mind, his boots bouncing once, twice, then the nod. "Sturdier than most bridges, Jack." "Unauthorized," I said to the lake, and the lake, in its honest way, didn't bother to answer. I didn't storm to Karen's door. That's what she wanted. Heat, noise, a scene. I folded the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into the folder already labeled permits, like you lay a card down in a game you didn't ask to play. By Tuesday, there was another letter. Failure to maintain dock aesthetics. On Wednesday, improper lawn edging. Thursday, unapproved outdoor furniture. By Friday, I joked to Bob that I was bracing for a citation for breathing near the water too loudly. He didn't laugh. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked at the yellow envelopes fanned on my kitchen table like a bad hand. "Jack," he said, voice low, "she's turning the screws." "She's mistaking quiet for surrender," I said. but my coffee tasted a little more bitter that morning. Pattern Interrupt came on a cloudless Saturday, her boat. It loomed so close to my dock I could touch it with my coffee mug. I stood there, rod in hand, the line jittering in the morning sun. The hull bumped my boards, once, twice. A little deliberate nudge, like a shoulder in a crowded hallway that says, "Move! Karen!" I called up toward her porch, where a glass flashed in the light. "Give me a foot!" From behind the sunglasses came the voice, sugar-coated with superiority. "Community Lake, Jack! Don't like it? Take it up with the HOA!" The boat bumped again. The line snagged her railing. The frogs stopped singing. That's how bullies operate. Little collisions, constant, grinding you down into something that nods. That afternoon, a sheriff's cruiser nosed into my driveway. I met him before he killed the engine. "Unsafe dock," he said. Polite, but already weary. "You tell me." He walked it end to end, boots thunking on the boards, bounced once, twice, just like the inspector. Sturdier than most county bridges. "Sorry to waste your time." He tipped his hat, eyes narrowing just enough to say, "Somebody's playing games." We didn't say her name. We didn't have to. The neighborhood began to tilt. A couple I'd barely met dropped their eyes at the mailbox, pretending to fidget with keys. The Martins still waved, but their smiles looked worried, like people who want to help but aren't sure if help is allowed. Then there were the loyalists, 3 or 4 who hovered near Karen like satellites, nodding at everything she said, laughing too hard at nothing. People who had found safety in someone else's certainty. I brought my folder to the next meeting. Permits, inspector notes, photographs with timestamps. I placed it on the table like a peace offering. "Karen," I said, "the dock's legal." She didn't even look down. "Legal doesn't always mean compliant," she said, the words so smooth they had worn grooves in her mouth. Something heavy clicked into place inside me. I picked the folder back up, slid it under my arm, and left before the vote. Bob found me later on my porch steps, where the evening pooled purple in the pines. "She won't stop," he said. "No," I said. "She'll escalate." "How far?" "As far as we let her." The next week, escalation arrived the way she did, heels clicking, decisions already made. Emergency session flyers appeared on every mailbox, addressing non-compliance and threats to property values. Everyone knew what those words meant. Before the meeting, I sat at my kitchen table, the folder open, papers squared. I kept thinking about the sheriff's boot bounce, the steady thud that said sound, sound, sound. I kept thinking about the boat, bumping my boards. I kept thinking about the way Karen's laugh carried over water like a thrown stone. Eventually, I closed my eyes and listened. The lake had its own advice. It said, "Build slow, measure twice." Don't swing until you know where the nail is. I needed a nail. The bylaws binder lived in a dusty cabinet in the HOA office, free to read, rarely read. That afternoon, I sat under the humming lights and flipped through sections on docks, boats, shoreline use. Words blurred, then snapped into focus. All watercraft must be registered with the HOA and state authorities. Unauthorized storage or docking of unregistered vessels is prohibited. I said it out loud just to hear the shape of it. Unregistered. People like Karen laminate grocery lists. But a thought snagged and wouldn't let go. I copied the clause, wrote the exact number in the margin, underlined it twice. Then I slipped the page into my folder and drove to the county clerk's office. It smelled like old paper and staplers. The clerk had tired eyes and a good heart. I gave Karen's address, the make and model I'd seen 100 times against my boards. Typing, a small frown. "Nothing under that name," she said. "Are you sure?" She turned the monitor toward me. "If it's out there, it's not registered. Here." The cursor blinked like a heartbeat on a flat line. I took a photo, just the screen, no faces, no names, cropped it, saved it. A receipt. Something heavy inside me shifted, not with anger this time, but with alignment. Back home, I walked, the shoreline at dusk. The boat gleamed like a trophy. Karen's dock sprawled wider than it should, a tasteful little seating area that hadn't tasted a vote. I took photos, angles, measurements on a tape, my hand steady, breath slow. Then I walked further where the map said HOA property began. Bob's voice traveled with me. That corner? Association land. She keeps her boat tied there half the time. Not allowed. By the rules. The rules. Not her rules. The rules she'd weaponized, thinking nobody would fire them back. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from nerves, but from an odd humming clarity. The kind that shows up when a plan stops being a plan and starts being inevitable. I made a list. Bylaw clause. Boat registration. County clerk. No record screen photo. Dock extension. Pull meeting minutes. 5 years. HOA land misuse. Geomark photos. Sheriff visit. Notes. Sturdier than bridges. Permit copies with stamps. Witness. Lines. Bob Martins. Short, clean, on paper if needed. At dawn, I brewed coffee and the steam smelled like resolve. Karen's boat nudged my boards at 8:13 a.m. I let it. Then I set my phone on the dock, camera pointed down, and recorded the hull kissing the wood. Soft, persistent, undeniable. Bump. A tiny sound. A little collision. The truth always knocks first. By noon, I'd pulled every meeting minute from the last 5 years. I read them on the HOA office couch while the assistant pretended not to watch me. No vote approving her extension. Not once. A hole as bright as daylight. I called an attorney. The one folks in town said you called when land tried to pretend, to be something else. Marcy. Her office was clean, no fake brass, just straight lines and a plant that didn't know it was indoors. Walk me through it, she said. I did. From the 24-hour threat to the yellow envelopes, to the sheriff's bounce, to the clerk's quiet no record. I laid the photos on her desk like cards. She flipped them slow, the way careful people do. Good, she said. Very good. 2 avenues. 1, defensive. We counter every claim with permits and inspections. 2, offensive. The bylaws. If her vessel is unregistered, the same enforcement language she's used against you allows for impound. Say that again, I said, even though I'd heard it. If it's unregistered, the HOA, and by extension the board's authorized agent, can move to impound the vessel. You request enforcement. They can't refuse without exposing bias. Bias. We can prove, I said. Marcy smiled the way sharp people smile when the path is straight and the weather's finally with you. Document everything. Keep your tone calm. Don't give her an inch to call you unreasonable. When the time comes, we file. And Jack? Yeah? Do it where people can see. Bullies lose altitude in daylight. I left with a new folder. Legal. Tucked. Under my arm. Outside, the lake shone the way metal shines when it's been polished too long. I passed the Martins on the path. They stood there, like they were deciding who should speak first. She fined us for wind chimes, Mrs. Martin said at last, cheeks pink. Too whimsical, Mr. Martin added, as if the word might be illegal to say out loud. Bring your chimes back, I said. Hang too. They didn't laugh. They looked relieved, which is a kind of laughter that hasn't learned to make noise yet. That evening, as the sky slid down into violet, Bob shuffled over with 2 beers. He sat. We watched the boat rock like it was nervous. You really think this ends? He said. It ends, I said. But I'm not aiming for her. I'm aiming for the lie she stands on. What's the lie? That rules are a crown, I said. They're not. They're a level. You set them down and they show you what's straight. Sunday brought flyers, emergency session, in capital letters that tried too hard. People read them with their mouths set tight. I spent the afternoon with a yellow highlighter and sticky notes, turning a pile of facts into something even nervous. People could understand at a glance. A photo labeled with a single arrow, a meeting minute with 1 line boxed. The clerk's screen cropped to a rectangle that said everything. Bylaw 7.4 underlined without drama. At 6:30, I stood in my bathroom mirror and practiced saying nothing in a dozen ways. Nods, a half smile, a quiet breath. People confuse loud with strong. I wanted the opposite, the kind of quiet that makes loud look silly. The hall was half lit when I arrived. Folding chairs scratched softly as neighbors settled. The coffee in the back tasted like meetings always do. Karen swept in at 6:59 sharp, navy suit this time. Serious, presidential, desperate. Her clipboard gleamed under fluorescent lights. She tapped the mic. The feedback hissed like a snake. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice smooth. "We're here to address a serious threat to our community standards." She didn't say my name right away. She let it hang, a trick to make people lean forward, to make them guess, to make them complicit. Then she held up photos of my dock, angled wrong, framed to lie, unsafe, non-compliant, an eyesore. A couple of loyalists clapped. Most didn't. The room smelled like paper and waiting. I stood when she tried to adjourn. "Rules matter," I said. "You're right about that. Let's apply them to everyone." I walked to the front with my binder. Calm, slow. I placed the first photo on the projector. Karen's dock. The tasteful seating area. The angle wider than the bylaw allowed. Board approval is required for extensions. 5 years of minutes. Not one vote. A murmur. Not outrage yet. Attention. I flipped the page. The clerk's screen. Cropped. Clean. The cursor like a pulse. "All watercraft must be registered with the HOA and state authorities," I read. "Clerk records show no registration." Gasps now. Heads turning. A loyalist whispered something that sounded like check. Again, the projector didn't care. It just threw truth on a wall. I put up the last slide. A photo of her boat tied to the railing where the plat map said HOA property began. The arrow I'd drawn pointed not at scandal, but at certainty. Personal. Property may not be stored on association land. Karen's smile tried to hold. It didn't. She leaned into the mic, voice bright and brittle. "This is a distraction. We are not here to discuss my dock or my—" "We're here to discuss rules," I said gently. "You said so yourself." Silence rolled through the room like a tide changing its mind. Power is a strange creature. It's loud when it thinks it's safe. It's very, very quiet when it realizes it's on stilts. Then, 3 knocks at the door. Not loud, just official. 2 men stepped in wearing company polos and caps. They carried clipboards. The taller one lifted his paperwork the way a bishop lifts a book. "Excuse us," he said to the room. "We're here for the impound." The room went still enough to hear the fluorescent hum. Karen took a step forward, then another. "No," she said. "No, you can't. This is outrageous. This is harassment. This is—" "Enforcement under HOA clause," the towman said. "Filed this afternoon. County stamped." Her eyes flicked to me. Hatred is hot when it has an audience. Fear is colder. She was both at once. "You," she said. "You did this." "I read the rules," I said. People stood. Phones rose. The towmen moved through the aisle with the steady pace of men who know that pacing is half the job. They walked out into the evening, and the room poured after them like water finding a slope. On the grass, her heels sank. On the dock, the straps sang. The orange band slid under the hull, soft, unstoppable, and clicked. Clicks are small sounds. They can feel like bells. "Stop!" she shouted, reaching for the line. The towman stepped aside without touching her. The other held out a pen. "Signature not required," he said, polite like a posted sign. I didn't speak. Bob didn't speak. The Martins held hands the way people do when the past is letting go of their throats. A loyalist said something about calling a lawyer. Another, Loyalist didn't answer. The boat lifted. Not a lot, just enough to look ridiculous. Queens look small without thrones. Someone laughed. It spread, then died, then came back as something kinder. Relief, learning how to breathe. As the truck eased forward. Karen stumbled after it, her voice breaking into pieces. "Do you know who I am?" "Ma'am," the towman said, not unkind. "We know what the paper says." The red lights winked twice. The truck rolled away, taillights shrinking like a promise satisfied. People turned. They looked at me like I'd pulled off a magic trick. I lifted my coffee the way a man salutes the sun, nothing more. Inside, the hall smelled like victory and coffee going cold. Karen hovered near the door, mascara smudged into a raccoon map of the last 10 minutes. Her clipboard hung from her hand the way a sword looks after the battle is over. I didn't need a vote. The room had already taken one, but I still wanted the words on record. I walked to the mic and said them plain. Rules are levels, not crowns, that's all. No applause, none needed. Sometimes the best sound is a room remembering how to be quiet. Outside, the lake breathed, indifferent and eternal. Later, alone on my dock, the night stitched itself together again. Frogs resumed their choir. Somewhere, a neighbor tested the wind. Chimes. Once, twice. The sound carried across the water like a new law, the kind that doesn't need signatures to be true. My phone buzzed on the wood beside me. A message from Marcy. "Nice work. Tomorrow, board procedure." Another from Bob. "Beer on me." A third from an unknown number. "Thank you." I stared at the screen, then at the stars. The dark held steady. The planks under me were as straight as the day I set them. I breathed like a man who had been holding his breath longer than he knew. The lake said what it always says when you finally listen. Stay level. Build slow. Keep your lines true. I closed my eyes. Sleep came like a friend who hadn't visited in months. And somewhere up the lane, in a house too big for comfort, a woman stared at a space where something used to be, and finally, understood that fear looks like power only from a distance. Morning would bring fallout, petitions, a vote, the quiet backbone of a neighborhood standing up one vertebra at a time. But night has its own work. It settles the dust. It resets the sky. I set my mug down and let the dock rock me. It did, gently, like a boat that knows the water and loves the shore. The phone buzzed again. A final message from Marcy. "One more thing. Board can call a no-confidence vote. You won't need to, Push. Just be ready when it breaks." I smiled into the dark. "Tomorrow," I said to the lake, "let's finish the job." The morning after felt different. And I don't just mean the air. The whole neighborhood seemed to exhale at once, like a community holding its breath for months and finally letting it out. The lake shimmered the same way it always did, fog curling off its glassy surface, but something about it felt freer. Even the frogs sounded louder, like they'd been waiting for their cue. I walked down to my dock with my coffee steaming in the chill. For the first time in weeks, I didn't brace myself to find a yellow envelope tucked between the boards, or a sheriff's cruiser parked by my driveway, or Karen's boat looming over my shoulder. The dock was just a dock again. Mine. Word of the impound spread faster than wildfire on dry grass. By noon, it seemed the whole neighborhood knew. Some whispered about it like gossip, eyes wide, hands cupped around mouths. Others spoke louder, telling it like a story they'd been dying to share. And then there were the few who came straight to my porch. The Martins arrived first, holding a pie. Cherry this time, the crust golden and flaky. Mrs. Martin handed it over with a tremble in her hands. "You don't know what you did for us," she said. I set the pie on the counter and shook my head. "Maybe not, but I know what she won't be doing anymore." Mr. Martin gave a little chuckle. "Wind chimes are going back up tomorrow. 2 sets. Their laughter carried all the way down the path. And for once, it wasn't nervous laughter. It was relief. That week, the neighborhood transformed. People who once avoided eye contact started waving again. Kids rode their bikes up and down the gravel lanes without parents calling them back to stay compliant. Bob lit his grill and turned the music up a little louder than usual, smoke drifting toward the lake. Nobody whispered about bylaws. Nobody muttered about standards. The whole place felt lighter, like someone had cut a rope that had been holding us all down. But if I thought Karen was finished, I was wrong. Bullies don't vanish overnight. They thrash, they scramble, they claw at whatever scraps of power they think they still have. And Karen, well, Karen doubled down. She filed appeals, hand-delivered letters to mailboxes, each stamped in angry red ink. Reinstatement of authority pending. She called emergency HOA meetings, paper flyers, taped to every door. The first time, maybe a dozen people showed up. The second, half that. By the third attempt, it was just Karen in her red blazer, standing at the podium with her clipboard, talking to empty chairs. But she didn't stop there. She stormed down the path one evening, heels sinking into the dirt, eyes flashing. "This isn't over, Jack," she shouted across the lawn. "I'll have your dock torn out plank by plank if I have to do it myself." I didn't rise. I didn't shout. I just lifted my mug and said, "Careful, Karen. Threats sound a lot different without a boat behind them." Her face flushed crimson. She spun on her heel, but I knew that line had landed. For the first time, her power wasn't echoed back to her. The HOA board finally decided enough was enough. A vote of no confidence was called, not whispered about, not hidden in paperwork, but spoken out loud in front of everyone. The secretary read it clearly. Motion to remove Karen Blake from the position of HOA president. Hands rose, one after another. Neighbors who had once nodded along with her raised their hands higher, quicker, firmer. Even her closest loyalists looked away when it came their turn. The motion passed. Just like that, the crown slipped. Karen wasn't HOA president anymore. No longer queen of clipboards. Just another neighbor with too many violations and a long list of fines stacking higher than her pride. But she still tried. I heard later she called the county office, demanding the boat be returned. She claimed bias, harassment, unfair treatment, but paperwork doesn't bend to arrogance. The county clerk pulled up the same blank screen I'd photographed, the same cursor blinking in the empty space where her registration should have been. Judges don't take kindly to hypocrisy. Her case fizzled out before it even reached a courtroom. Neighbors started talking in ways they hadn't dared before. One family confessed Karen fined them over too many potted plants. Another said she threatened them over a kid's swing set, claiming it was non-compliant outdoor furniture. Bob admitted she once told him his grill was lowering property values. Everyone had a story, tucked away like bruises hidden under sleeves. Now, one by one, they let them out. We laughed together, sometimes bitterly, sometimes freely, but always with relief. The community started to heal in small, visible ways. The Martins' wind chimes returned, clinking softly with the breeze. A neighbor planted sunflowers in defiance of Karen's old uniform landscape rules. Kids chalked hopscotch squares on the sidewalks Karen once patrolled. The sound of laughter replaced the sound of her heels. Karen still walked the neighborhood now and then, but it wasn't the same. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no authority. Just a woman with her head down, avoiding stares that once would have bowed to her. That was the real end. Not the boat, not the vote, but the silence of her power. People simply stopped caring what she had to say. One evening I sat on my dock with my grandson beside me. He dangled his legs over the water, fishing pole clumsy in his small hands. "Grandpa," he asked, "is this where the lady tried to take your dock?" I smiled, tying his knot for him. "Yeah, buddy, right here." "What happened to her?" he asked. "She lost," I said. because the rules work both ways. He nodded, thoughtful, and cast his line with all the seriousness of a man twice his age. The lure plopped into the water, rippling out circles. "Good," he said simply, and that was enough. The truth is, the lake taught me something Karen never could. Water doesn't shout, it doesn't bully, it just waits, steady, patient, wearing down even the sharpest stones. And when it's tested, it doesn't break. It flows. Karen tried to evict me. She tried to strip me of peace. In the end, she stripped herself of everything. Her boat, her title, her grip on the neighborhood. And me? I didn't just keep my dock. I gained something. Bigger. I gained back my peace. Autumn crept in with slow footsteps. The lake shifted from bright blues to deeper silvers, the trees lining the shore painting themselves in reds, oranges, and golds. The world moved on as if nothing had happened, and yet everything had. Karen's boat was gone. The trailer in her driveway sat empty, a hollow skeleton collecting leaves. Her house, once blazing with porch lights and trimmed hedges, manicured within an inch of their lives, seemed quieter now. Curtains drawn, fewer cars in. The driveway. The queen had been dethroned, and her kingdom had stopped bowing. But the community came alive. The Martins hung not one but two sets of wind chimes, letting their metallic songs drift across the lake. A neighbor planted bright sunflowers against their fence, yellow faces turned defiantly toward the sun. Kids chalked hopscotch squares and stick figures onto the sidewalks Karen once patrolled like a border guard. Bob's grill smoke rose every Saturday, the smell of ribs and burgers wafting over the water. For the first time in years, people laughed outside without checking over their shoulders. The HOA meetings, once battlefields filled with Karen's decrees, shrank into what they were meant to be: short, simple, practical, fixing potholes, scheduling a cleanup for the community park, debating which flowers to plant along the entrance. Without Karen's voice filling the room, meetings lasted 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. People left smiling, not muttering. It was like watching a garden finally bloom after someone stopped pulling out every flower that didn't match their taste. I noticed it in the little things. The Martins' pie deliveries grew more frequent. Blueberry, apple, pecan, as if every crust was their way of saying thank you without repeating the words. One evening, I found a basket of fresh tomatoes on my porch with a note. For standing up when we couldn't. At first, I didn't know who had left it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was from everyone. Karen, of course, didn't disappear. People like her rarely do. She still walked the neighborhood, though slower now, without her clipboard, her heels traded for quiet flats. She still filed letters with the county, still scribbled appeals, still muttered at the board meetings from the back row. But no one listened. No one followed. And that, more than the impound, more than the no-confidence vote, was her true defeat. She hadn't just lost her boat. She had lost her audience. One Sunday afternoon, the neighborhood hosted something we hadn't seen in years: a block barbecue. Tables lined the grassy patch near the lake. Kids ran with sparklers. Adults carried trays of food. Someone set up a speaker playing old rock songs. Bob manned the grill, flipping burgers with the authority of a man who'd finally been promoted to chief of the cul-de-sac. I stood near my dock, paper plate in hand, when Mrs. Martin sidled up to me. She nodded toward the crowd. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "Feels lighter," I said. She smiled, eyes misty. "We didn't just get rid of a president, Jack. We got back our neighborhood." That night, as the last of the sparklers fizzled out and laughter echoed across the water, I sat on my dock with a fresh cup of coffee. The boards creaked the way they always did, steady under my weight. I let my legs dangle over the edge, the cool water licking my shoes. I thought about the months before, the yellow envelopes piling up, the whispers at mailboxes, the boat looming like a throne. I thought about the look on Karen's face when the tow straps clicked into place. I thought about how quickly fear had melted into relief once the truth had come into daylight. And I realized something. The dock wasn't just mine anymore. Sure, I had built it, nailed every board, measured every span. But now it was something bigger. A symbol, maybe. A reminder that standing your ground matters, that bullies crumble when someone finally says, no. That rule's cut both ways, no matter how loudly someone waves a clipboard. My grandson joined me one evening not long after. He sat cross-legged, fishing pole clutched tight, his small fingers fumbling with the reel. "Grandpa," he asked, "are you glad you built this dock?" I looked out over the water, the reflection of the sunset stretching in gold and red. "Glad?" I said. "It's the best thing I ever built." "Even better than houses?" he asked. I nodded. Even better than houses, because this one wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who comes here. For you. He smiled, cast his line, and leaned against my shoulder. The water rippled. The frogs croaked. The wind carried the soft music of the martin's chimes. Peace, real peace. And somewhere behind us, in a house that had once tried to rule the lake, Karen sat in silence, her clipboard tucked away, her voice no longer carrying across the water. Just another neighbor, stripped of the fear that had once been her crown. The truth, I realized, doesn't roar. It waits. It doesn't need to shout to win. It just needs someone to pick it up, hold it steady, and let it shine in the daylight. That's what I had done. And that's why, no matter what else happened, the lake would never feel the same again. Winter arrived quietly, laying a silver hush across the lake. Snow blanketed the roofs, the trees bowed under ice, and the dock groaned softly beneath its white cover. Even then, I made my way down each morning with a steaming mug in my hand. Boots crunching on the path. The water had stilled, frozen in patches, but the peace was louder than ever. There were no yellow envelopes waiting on my porch, no sheriff's cruisers idling at the curb, no oversized boat nudging at my boards in the dark. For the first time since moving to the lake, life was exactly what I had dreamed of. Simple, steady, mine. Karen's presence lingered, but only as an echo. Neighbors no longer spoke her name in whispers, but as a cautionary tale. "Remember when she..." became the opening line of a dozen conversations. "Remember when she fined us for bird feeders? Remember when she tried to ban swing sets? Remember when she nearly tore down a dock that was sturdier than most bridges? Her house stood the same, but it no longer loomed. It was just another house now, its porch light dim, its driveway bare. The clipboard queen had been dethroned, and, in her absence, the neighborhood bloomed like wildflowers in spring. The HOA continued without her, trimmed down to what it was meant to be, a tool, not a weapon. Meetings ended in 20 minutes instead of hours. Neighbors left smiling, carrying notes about community projects instead of violation slips. Bob joined the board, his first suggestion being a summer fish fry at the park. The martins planted, roses along the entrance sign. Kids rode bikes without fearing compliance patrol. The community had found its voice. One warm spring evening, the neighborhood gathered for a cookout by the lake. Tables sagged with food, music played, and kids darted around with sparklers. Bob stood at the grill like a general at his post, flipping burgers with practiced precision. The martins handed out slices of fresh pie. Someone brought out a cooler full of sodas, and laughter carried across the water. I sat at my dock, watching it all, a paper plate balanced on my knee. For years, Karen had convinced us that order meant fear, that community meant control, that rules were crowns to be worn, not levels to be honored, and for years, people had believed her. But tonight, Looking out at the smiling faces, I saw what community really was. People sharing food, children playing freely, neighbors trusting each other. Karen had tried to shrink us. Instead, she had made us stronger. Later that night, my grandson climbed onto the dock with his fishing pole. He sat cross-legged, staring at the lake glowing under the moon. "Grandpa," he said, "did you know she couldn't win?" I thought about it. About the months of letters, the fines stacking like bricks, the whispers at mailboxes, the way my own neighbors had looked at me with doubt. Did I know? No. I only knew I couldn't let her. I wasn't sure, I admitted. But I knew I had to try. He nodded, his small hands gripping the pole tightly. "I'm glad you did, because now everyone's free." His words landed heavier than he realized. Everyone's free. That was it. That was the whole story. Not just a dock, not just a boat, but a community set free from fear. The truth is, bullies don't need armies. They just need silence. They grow fat on fear, feeding, off compliance, strutting around like kings and queens while everyone else lowers their eyes. But the moment someone stands up, the illusion cracks, the crown falls, and everyone sees them for what they are. Just another neighbor, smaller than the noise they made. Karen lost her boat. She lost her title. She lost the silence that gave her power. And me? I kept my dock. I kept my peace. But more than that, I gave my neighbors a reminder. Rules aren't crowns. They're levels. They're supposed to keep things straight, not weigh people down. One night, long after the barbecue ended and the laughter faded, I sat on the dock alone. The water lapped against the boards, the frogs sang their steady chorus, and the martin's wind chimes whispered on the breeze. I closed my eyes and thought about the journey, the fines, the fights, the way fear had nearly taken root, and the way truth had pulled it up by the roots. I realized then that this dock wasn't just a sanctuary for me anymore. It was a marker for everyone, proof that fear doesn't last forever, that truth outlasts arrogance, that peace can be reclaimed if someone's willing to stand up. Maybe one day, years from now, my grandson will bring his own kids here. Maybe he'll sit them down on these boards and tell them the story. About the lady who tried to take what wasn't hers. About the boat that was hauled away. About the neighborhood that found its voice. And maybe he'll say the same words he told me that night. Now everyone's free. That's the legacy. Not the fight, not the fines, but the freedom. So here's what I'll leave you with. If you've got a Karen in your life, a boss, a neighbor, a bully in a suit, or with a clipboard, don't mistake their volume for power. Don't mistake their rules for crowns. Stand steady, gather your truth, and when the time comes, speak it in the daylight. You might just find that everyone around you was waiting for someone to lead the way. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced someone like Karen? Someone who thought control was the same as respect? How did you stand up? Drop your story in the comments below. I'll be reading them, and I'll pin a few of the best ones. And if you enjoyed this story of HOA drama, revenge, and justice, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join our growing community, because trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.